In the early months of 1851, a discovery was made that would change the fate of a young colony forever. The winds carried whispers of gold in the streams of Victoria, a place barely known to the outside world. News spread quickly, but the full magnitude of the events that would follow was yet to be revealed. What began as a humble find soon spiraled into a fever gripping thousands, promising fortune yet threatening lives. Victoria, until then a quiet part of the Australian frontier, was on the brink of transformation. The land was rugged, marked by dense forests and rushing rivers. Settlers lived a harsh life, tending to farms or working modest trades, dreaming of better prospects. Then the gold came, shining and elusive, shimmering beneath the soil, in riverbeds, and across the hills. Men and women from far and wide dropped everything, compelled by the hope of striking it rich. The first nugget was found near Bathurst by Edward Hargraves, a man who had traveled the world chasing fortune. His claim ignited a frenzy that would flood Victoria with prospectors known as diggers. The colony's population exploded as the news traveled across oceans to Britain, China, and America. People traveled in ships, caravans, and on foot, all driven by the same dream. Goldfields mushroomed overnight, tents sprouted across the landscape, and bustling camps turned into towns. But the story of the gold rush was not merely one of wealth. It was a story of hardship, greed, and survival. The diggers faced treacherous terrain, unpredictable weather, and fierce competition. Conflicts erupted over claims, and lawlessness threatened to unravel society. The government struggled to maintain order, introducing mining licenses and police patrols to keep the peace. Among the throng was a young man named Thomas McAllister, an Irish immigrant whose life embodied the hopes and struggles of the era. Thomas had left Ireland during the Great Famine, his family shattered by loss and poverty. Arriving in Melbourne, he was drawn by the gold fever. With little more than a pickaxe and a dream, he set out to find his fortune. The early days on the diggings tested Thomas's resolve. The sun was relentless, the nights bitterly cold. Days were spent digging, washing, and panning, fingers raw and back aching. Many around him gave up, disheartened by failure. Yet Thomas kept pushing, motivated by the vision of a better life. At one particularly desperate moment, Thomas discovered a promising patch near a creek bed. It was a hidden spot, untouched by the crowds, where the soil sparkled faintly with gold dust. Word of his find spread, and suddenly his camp was surrounded by eager prospectors. The peaceful place quickly turned tense as claim jumpers and thieves lurked. Thomas knew that holding on to this claim would require more than luck. Elsewhere, the gold rush was fueling a diverse and sometimes volatile mix of people. Chinese miners arrived in large numbers, bringing different customs and techniques. They faced prejudice and hostility, but carved out their own enclaves. The clash of cultures and interests added complexity to the social fabric of Victoria. As wealth flowed in, the colony began to prosper. Melbourne transformed from a dusty outpost into a thriving city. Banks were established, grand buildings rose, and infrastructure expanded. The gold rush had unlocked unprecedented economic growth, yet shadows loomed beneath the glittering surface. Stories circulated of fortune won and lost, of lives ruined by addiction and violence. The promise of gold blinded many to the human cost. Corruption seeped into politics, and the struggles of the indigenous population worsened as mining disrupted their lands. Thomas's journey mirrored the larger saga. After months of struggle, a major strike of gold changed his fortunes. Suddenly wealthy, he faced the challenges of newfound status, balancing ambition with integrity and the lure of excess with his roots. His story would weave through the fabric of a society reshaped by gold, a society on the edge of modernity and chaos. The gold rush era was not simply a chapter of mining, it was the forging of a nation's identity. It revealed resilience, ambition, and the dark side of human nature. Victoria's landscape and people bore the marks of this explosive period, echoes of which remain to this day. What would become of Thomas? Would the gold bring him happiness or ruin? How would the colony navigate the challenges of wealth and change? The answers lie ahead as the rush deepens and the stakes grow higher. The morning after Thomas's big strike was filled with a mix of excitement and caution. The gold he had found promised a new life, yet the gold fields were ruthless. Fortunes could vanish overnight. Rivals lurked, ready to seize any opportunity, and the unforgiving wilderness spared no one. What had once been a scattered camp had grown into a bustling mining town. Amid the tents and rough shelters, tension simmered. Thomas's claim drew attention, not all friendly. One evening, cries echoed through the camp. Thomas rushed to his claim to find men trying to steal his precious ground. The confrontation was tense but brief. Thomas's growing reputation as a strong and fair man kept the attackers at bay. Though uneasy, a fragile peace was brokered. The goldfields demanded strength. Those who faltered often lost everything. Yet even in hardship, community flourished. Around campfires, miners from diverse backgrounds shared stories and helped each other survive. Thomas found comfort in these friendships, a wealth beyond gold. As months passed, the gold rush's influence spread beyond the diggings. Melbourne blossomed from a dusty settlement into a thriving city. Gold financed schools, hospitals, railways, and grand buildings. Yet prosperity was uneven. Many who had journeyed here with dreams of riches found themselves penniless, trapped in grueling work or struggling to survive. Among the miners was Ah Wei, a Chinese laborer who faced prejudice and isolation but worked relentlessly. His story reflected the goldfields' multicultural reality. Despite hostility, the Chinese community thrived, contributing to Victoria's growth and leaving a lasting legacy. Tensions between miners and the government rose over mining license fees, which many saw as unjust taxes benefiting officials, while miners suffered. This unrest erupted into the famous Eureka Rebellion of 1854. Thomas sympathized deeply with the cause. The fight was about more than fees. It was about fairness and representation. When government troops stormed the Eureka Stockade, Thomas stood with his fellow diggers, willing to risk everything for justice. Though crushed, the rebellion led to reforms. Licenses were replaced with fairer permits, and miners gained political voice. The gold rush ignited not only wealth, but democratic ideals. As wealth poured in, social gaps grew. Thomas, now prosperous, wrestled with his role. Investing in businesses and land, he aimed to build a lasting legacy. But gold's lure tempted many into greed and excess, threatening the values that had guided him. Meanwhile, the indigenous peoples of Victoria suffered deeply. Their lands were overrun and their ways disrupted. Thomas could not ignore this injustice, troubled by the cost of progress. By the late 1850s, the gold rush slowed. Many diggers moved on or returned home, their fortunes varied. Victoria, transformed forever, grew in population and complexity. Melbourne's streets now boasted elegant buildings and vibrant culture, a monument to gold's power. Thomas's journey, from poor immigrant to successful landowner, mirrored the era's promise and peril. The gold rush taught that true wealth lay not just in gold, but in resilience, community, and integrity. Victoria's towns, born from the hopes and sweat of thousands, became centers of industry and learning. The era of prosperity laid the foundation for modern Australia. Still, the hills and rivers of Victoria whispered stories of that fevered time, tales of courage, greed, hope, and loss that shaped a nation's history. The gold rush in Victoria remains a powerful saga of human ambition and the complex legacy of progress, forever changing Australia's destiny.